Good morning or good afternoon, Benjamin. How are you?
I am great, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so great to have you here today. It's been we've been talking about having you on here for, I think since about I launched the show, and here we are in August of 2020, finally making it happen. So no time like the present. So let's get into it. I know we have a lot of awesome stuff to talk about today. So first things first, love if you would just introduce yourself, Benjamin, where you are in the world right now, and just a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Benjamin Degenhardt. I'm originally from Germany, longtime New Yorker and a digital nomad of the last 2.5 years. I'm currently in Cyprus, not by choice, but I got stuck here on my travels. When the world changed earlier in 2020. And I'm a dancer turned Pilates teacher turned Pilates teacher trainer turned educator and presenter turned software entrepreneur, which is how I'm able to basically live around the globe these days and ride out this crazy wave we're all on.
That's awesome. That's so super cool. I know we're going to get into your journey. I know you outside of the podcast, so I know a little bit about your story, but it's fascinating the different things you've taken on and where you've taken your life. And Cyprus, you're the first guest that I've interviewed who's in Cyprus. I've interviewed a few guests.
Is that so?
Yes, I know that's shocking. I've interviewed some people, like somebody in Amsterdam. I've interviewed a couple people around the world. Never in Cyprus. So first on the show. So thank you for another first for me. All right. So
it's my pleasure.
Yeah. So a couple of traditions on the show, Benjamin, how we met. So Benjamin and I met through our mutual friend, Evan, who is guest number 2 on the show. So great episode. You're good friends with Evan. I'm good friends with Evan. So that's how we met, through mutual friendship. It's really great. And the other tradition I like to do on the show is talk about our first impressions of each other. And this is interesting for you and I because we've spent quite a bit of time on the phone and we've never met in person. So we've known each other for about a year now and we've never met in person. So our first impressions of each other will be over the phone only. So because it's my show, I would love it if you would go first. So what was your first impression of me when we met about a year ago?
All right. Yeah. And I believe I was in Cyprus at the time when we first met too.
I think you were, yes.
A fun full circle moment. And
there you go.
As you know, it's rare to catch me in the same place twice. So
yes.
My first impression of you, well, I'm sure everybody listening has caught my accent by now. I have this thing when I meet new people where I can tell very quickly if I have good chemistry with somebody based on my approach to the English language.
Yeah.
I'm more fluent in it than I am my native tongue, but it is my second language. And I still have this thing where when I socialize and I meet somebody new, I very quickly realize how well I click with somebody by the way that I feel comfortable and not self-conscious about my use of the language. So my first impression of you was really that you were super easy to talk to for me, which is something that I'm highly aware of when I meet somebody for the first time. And I just remember us having a very long, deep conversation that was just really fully satisfying and almost felt like a conversation between two people who've known each other for a while. So That's really the thing I remember.
That's awesome. Thank you, Benjamin. That is very touching. So thank you. I think it's the Minnesota Nice that I've talked about on the show.
Like just maybe
Minnesota Nice. I don't know, Midwestern Nice. I've covered that I'm originally from Minnesota, which try to treat everybody with kindness and respect. And I find so this leads to my first impression of you. It's funny that I think about it. I never think about your accent. It doesn't even cross my mind that it's something that I have to understand. I've never had any issue understanding you at all. And so even on the first impression, thinking back about a year ago now, I don't remember. I think it's one of you have an accent and then you don't think about it. So interesting that you're keen on that and I never really even notice it. The impression that I had of you in our conversation is you're somebody with a huge heart and you're very kind and you are very creative. It was very obvious from what we were talking about that you're very creative and we got into your business and what you're up to. And as we'll talk about here in the show today, your path through the arts and then through fitness, which is, in my opinion, is artistic, and to what you're doing now, there's always an element of art that runs through all of that for you. And so I was able to sense that in our very first conversation. So very cool. And here we are today.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get right into it. So Benjamin, first question for you. What is something that you nerd out about?
I mean, the obvious answer would be Pilates, which I'm sure I'll talk you ears off about throughout the show. So I think more currently what I'm nerding out about is I think a more expected level of nerdery, which is the wonderful world of software. For the last 2 years, I've been sort of in this role of trying to develop a way to literally download my teachings and my passion for the Pilates method and movement in general into a software solution for the people that I typically work with. And that is about as far outside of my comfort zone as anything, truly. Like the world of software was something that was really daunting and scary to me. And once I crossed a certain threshold, I started becoming really, really fascinated with getting my hands dirty in the world of coding, developing, user experience design, graphic design, what have you. So currently that's something I focus on a lot and that I just love spending time getting better at. There's a whole language attached to that, and something that obviously helps me in my work, communicating with people that help me out with technological stuff. But it's also something that I truly and genuinely enjoy nerding out about these days.
That's interesting. So you like fingers on keyboard actually developing code now?
Yes, it's
That's
the
awesome.
antithesis to everything I've ever done in my life, which is always about physical movement. And the thing that brings me joy right now is to actually be completely immobile, tied to my desk and solving problems in a creative, artistic kind of way. And, especially when it works, it just equally rewarding and still terrifying. Yeah, that's where awesome. I'm at with that.
That's so ironic as we go through the episode, and like you said, you talk about what's led you to today. This is going to be a very ironic thing that what you find great joy in is sitting in front of a computer. Do you wear the anonymous hoodie? I'm picturing you with like dark sunglasses. The anonymous hoodie, the anonymous meme.
I do. Well, it's way too hot where I am to wear hoodies. So there's that, but there might be sunglasses. I can't tell.
Sunglasses, maybe sunglasses. That's great.
Maybe.
What do you code in, or like what languages have you started coding in, or have you learned and taught yourself?
Well, coding is probably not the right word for what I do, because my developer who works with me would probably roll his eyes at me saying that I was coding. I just have what he calls dangerous half knowledge. But we're working in sort of a WordPress environment and have spent a significant amount of time for the last 2 years just developing a stack that really brings our vision to life. And, there's dependencies within that where there's just a lot of customization required. And little by little, I'm starting to get more comfortable with CSS and all of the things that are required to really bring this product to life in a way that is respectful of its original vision and sort of the underlying philosophy that's behind it.
Yeah, that's very cool. We're going to get more into this, definitely. So let's go to the next question. I know I'm fascinated by your answer on this one from what I know of you. So this is around your comfort zone, and the comfort zone we define as the things that you will do and that you're comfortable doing. So Benjamin, what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is that I'm very willingly stepping outside my comfort zone in the first place. If I look back sort of at my trajectory, and not to jump ahead too far, but I feel like my secret superpower really is to tackle and attack things that are really uncomfortable for me. And, growing up, I was a pretty chubby kid, unhappy with my own body, shy, introvert, all of those things. So somehow that funneled into me being on stage as a dancer where, I had to speak with my body, the thing that I was most uncomfortable with. And somehow That's where I think that superpower was born, to just go into things that are really, really uncomfortable to me and see the positive in tackling and mastering that. That has trickled down into public speaking, which, if you know me personally, but anybody who knows me personally knows that I'm not necessarily, somebody who likes to put himself on a platform or pedestal, and yet that's what I do repeatedly. And I like to think that I've managed to do that well over the years. So those are all things that, if you had asked me some 30 years ago, I would have never in a million years imagined that that's what I end up doing with my life. But here I am. So I feel like stepping willingly outside my comfort zone is something that I actually welcome. And that's something that gives me life energy, and something that drives me and challenges me and just really gives me excitement in life.
Yeah. Are you a Batman fan at all? Like, have you ever seen the Christopher Nolan Batman movies?
I have. It's a while ago. I'm not really into the world of superheroes, so I always get stuff mixed up. But I think I have the overall gist.
Yeah. Well, the reason that, do you know why, according to Batman Begins, which was like the first movie in the Christopher Nolan trilogy with Christian Bale, do you know why Batman is Batman?
Like,
what made him actually pick Batman as his character?
No, enlighten me, please.
Yeah, according to the mythos of that movie, it's because when he was young, Bruce Wayne fell into a well and had bats all around him, and he realized it was his greatest fear, and so he became his greatest fear.
There you go. That's me in a nutshell. I guess I'm kind of a Batman then.
You're kind of a Batman, kind of a superhero. All that to say, I think you're a superhero. That's what I'm saying here.
Great.
I have a question.
Love it.
I actually have a question for you, or if you could share a little bit of wisdom with the audience around this. I think the fear of public speaking thing is a common one that comes up in the show, either because I interview a lot of speakers who have gotten over that, or they're not that scared of it and they never have been. It's kind of been their thing. If somebody here to listening today is interested in public speaking specifically, but kind of have that same thing, like, oh, that sounds really scary to me, and they're looking and they're hearing your story of how you've actually worked through that and how that's something you do, as part of your career now, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to get started in there, both with around the fear part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word that comes up for a lot of people, or the expression, is the idea of the imposter syndrome, right? People are like, who am I to, stand on stage and speaking my truth, etc. And there's a lot of fear around being caught in something that maybe isn't justifiable, etc. And I think the most empowering insight for me at some point was that, who am I not to have imposter syndrome? Of course, I don't know what I'm doing. Of course, I don't know if I'm going to have a wardrobe malfunction as a teacher. As a dancer. I can't know whether I have the answer for my client as a personal trainer, etc. Like, whichever scenario you find yourself in, there are no absolute truths other than the one that comes from a deep place of intention. And I think that is something that was deeply ingrained in me by my teachers, both in the world of dance and Pilates and fitness and so forth, that really helped me tap into a place of embracing the stage fright and embracing the imposter syndrome as something that humanizes the experience, and that allows me to embrace any mistakes that I make along the way, because I know that they're coming from an honest place. And I know that anything I do, and I think as a dancer, you learn that very quickly. Yeah, you will fall on stage. You will, put your costume on inside out with your name label for the whole audience to see because you put it on in the dark backstage, etc. There are going to be moments that are deeply embarrassing, but the world keeps turning and you have a chance at redeeming yourself, and it'll make you better at whatever it is you do. And I think that's a concept that has always translated into any other aspect of life where I was afraid to do something and then mastered that situation, or at least put myself through the discomfort of figuring it out and living with that fear, even if it's public, and sort of getting to the bottom of what is my truth. Why did I do that in the first place? Why do I believe it's important to stand on stage? Why is it important for me to speak to somebody about something that I truly believe in? Why do I need to be vocal? about that. So I think that's really how I overcome, not just overcome stage fright, but also embrace it as the thing that pushes me forward, because ultimately it means that I care enough about what I'm about to do that I'm aware of the potential of failure. If I didn't care about it, what does that say about my time in the spotlight? So I think that's a really great place to start looking for, how to overcome that and learn to embrace it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bender. That's super inspiring. Thanks for sharing that. Now we're going to look at the reverse of that question for you. So what is something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's?
Stand still. I think I have a really difficult time letting something be and letting it go. And that transcends into the speeches I've created, the workshops I've created, the product I'm currently working on, about conversations in family, friendship, etc., relationships and whatnot. I think something that's outside my comfort zone is to just let things sit and speak for themselves, and give them time to unfold and blossom, so to speak. So it makes it very hard for me to be relaxed about the things that I put out in the world, as I'm sure you've noticed over the year that we've known each other.
Yeah.
And I think within that is also just my deep desire and love for tinkering and continuing to refine and make it better. And it's not perfectionism, because I don't believe in perfectionism, but it is this idea of, okay, I can do just a little bit more. Yeah. What would happen if I changed it a little bit? And again, that's both in product design, in the way that I communicate with others, etc. I'm always super highly aware of that. And I feel like the letting go part within that, and the standstill of let it just do its thing. If you've done your job, now just see what happens, is far outside my comfort zone.
Yeah. Is that something you're interested in practicing, or you've been working on, or just like I'm just not going to do it?
Oh no, I'm constantly practicing it. Like, as I said earlier, like going outside my comfort zone is something that I actually embrace. Yeah. But this is one of those places where, and this kind of goes back to the last question about how to overcome stage fright, imposter syndrome, and, this finding the confidence to public speak, etc. I think I am comfortable leaving that comfort zone when I know what's on the other side of it. With stuff that is far outside my comfort zone, like, letting something speak for itself, letting it open to the interpretation of others, that's when I don't know what's on the other side. So then I immediately go into overthinking mode. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's almost a different approach, but I always welcome it. And I always welcome the discomfort. And who knows, maybe one day it will be inside my comfort zone.
Yeah. And then you'll be bored with it, and you have to find something else outside your comfort zone to bring into your comfort zone. It's perfect. It's
most likely what's going to happen.
Yeah. I love that. No, that's a great, that keeps you always moving forward and learning something new, which is awesome. You'll never be stagnant with that attitude.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those, Benjamin. That was really interesting.
Well, now thanks for asking.
We're talking about public speaking and something that you do. First of all, what's the largest audience you've ever spoken to? Let's go with live. Let's talk about, remember those times when you used to go and fly places and get on stages and there's people in a room together? It was pre-COVID. I don't know if you remember that. I vaguely remember. Yeah.
I thought that was just a dream.
It kind of feels that way. What's the largest audience you've ever spoken to, and where was it?
Oh gosh, I believe the biggest audience I've spoken to was a conference keynote. I believe it was in Brazil, but it all blends in. There was a while where I was traveling a lot. Mm-hmm. I believe it was in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And I think there were probably 300 to 400 people in the audience. And I think for a live audience in the realm where I was working, which was the Pilates field and is the Pilates field, that was probably the largest audience I've spoken to.
Yeah. Nice. And do you find the larger the audience, does the larger audience change your stage fright at all and your nervousness at all?
Funny enough, I believe the larger the audience, the more it dilutes the stage fright a little bit,
I've heard
because
that. Yeah.
you get to speak into more of an anonymous bubble, an
Hmm.
ocean of people, rather than addressing five people that sit right in front of you. And I think there's a huge difference between those two. But yeah, I believe at this point, I like to think that it doesn't really make that much of a difference anymore. I will say that it only takes one person to throw the energy around, and then it doesn't
Yeah.
even matter if there's
Yeah.
1,000 other people or two. But I think, generally speaking, the larger the audience, the more you can speak to a larger entity rather than
Yeah.
addressing somebody directly. And I believe that positively impacts any resistance you might feel about public
Yeah.
speaking. In my
Yeah.
experience, anyway.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I'm just thinking about also from an energy perspective, the more people in the room, just like the human energy that's being generated. This is a curiosity question. I never thought about it before. I've never really read anything about what the theories are, what other people's experience. So I thought I would ask you because I got you here in the line with me. So it's perfect.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're
you're right.
talking.
I think,
Yeah.
sorry, I
Okay.
think you're right about the energy piece for sure. I think just having, you know, the anticipation and expectation multiplied by 100, 200, 300 people also creates a different bar to climb or to rise above in terms of really reaching. And I think once the amount of people you speak to becomes so insurmountable that you can't possibly address every single one and make every single one in the audience happy, I think it also relieves a lot of expectation on yourself.
Hmm.
And again, I'm speaking out of my own experience. I don't have any
Yeah.
research to back this up with. But I think the energy piece is huge in that for sure.
Yeah. That's cool. So, hypothetical situation for you. I give you 5 minutes and you get to deliver any speech you want on any topic and the whole world is going to listen to it. What is it that you'd give your speech on and why?
Hmm. 5 minutes.
This is your this
Well,
is your micro TED talk.
a micro TED talk. I love
Micro TED
that.
talk. That's you heard it here first. Micro TED talk.
Yeah, love it. I'm pretty sure that given that opportunity, the conversation I would like to impart on people, and it's a speech I've given a million times to small and large audiences, but I think it always comes down to something that has become a universal truth for me, which is that embracing my body and physical expression as
Hmm.
a big part of my humanity has made me a full person. And what I mean with that, sort of going back in time a little bit, and I sort of hinted at it earlier, I was a little bit of a lost kid, if you will, growing up in small town Germany, not really having, a taste of the greater world in my upbringing, and having a hard time to connect to others. I've always felt like socializing wasn't really my happy place. I always like to keep to myself and sort of like do my own thing and tinker around, then young boy discovers dance, which is also an odd thing to do, which didn't help. But I feel like when I discovered my physicality as a human being,
Hmm.
outside of, say, fitness, outside of a sport, but as a means of expression and as a way to get to know myself on a pure physical level, I blossomed into, I believe, a full person that
Mm.
had something to say, that had a way to say it, that had a purpose and a way to express that purpose. And I believe that is something that a lot of people are missing in their lives. I truly believe that.
Hmm.
And even though we're living a time where more people are engaged in fitness than ever before, I think there's a piece adjacent to fitness where physical movement sort of goes into the background. Yeah, you move when you exercise, but movement and movement practice is something entirely different. And that
Hmm.
can be dance, that can be hiking, walking, that can be anything that doesn't have exercise at its first sort of priority and purpose. That is a way to get to know yourself, the way that your body works, the way that health is constituted in physical movement. And I think that is something that a lot of us have lost or have never gotten in touch with. And I believe that is one of the most powerful things you can discover about yourself is your physicality. So I'm pretty sure that I would spend those 5 minutes to bring that point home.
Yeah. So a good speech always has a call to action at the end. So I'm guessing that your speech has a call to action. What is the thing that you want the audience to take away with and take action on as they leave after that speech? And in other words, what's the advice you have for our audience today listening to this? If that's something they're struggling with, and this is very timely in the time of COVID, depending on where you are in the world, especially if you live in a large city, it's quite a bit harder to go out and gyms are closed. So for those people that are like, so what's the call to action that you'd provide to us?
Well, my call to action, and I think as social media was on the rise, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think it was my first official hashtag. It's simply
That's
move
great.
well every day. Move well every day. And I think, we're in an exciting time. I mean, not exciting, as in like, woohoo, let's party. COVID is here, right? I'm super sensitive to the distress, the unease, the anxiety that we're all experiencing right now. But when I say exciting, I mean there's an opportunity to look at how do I fill my day? How do I become constructive and take control over the few things that I now have control over? Now that all the things that we took for granted are sort of falling away, and I think. The fact that gyms are closed and they may not be the same when they reopen. And a lot of people are discovering they may not actually need it all that much. I think this is an exciting time to actually invest in this idea of becoming more conscious of your opportunities to move. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be a punishing spin class. Obviously if that's your thing, go for it. Kudos, congratulations, wonderful, love it. But there's something else to be found when you become conscious about how you use your body on a daily basis in the little opportunities you might have today. And it could just be a breath, but taking that with gusto and with a moment of true consciousness can be a movement practice in and of itself. Moving around in a smaller radius, can provide that same level of consciousness about your body. I know you love taking walks, these days. I do the same. It doesn't have to be anything strenuous or sporty in that way. So I think, just kind of keeping a lookout on what have I done for my body to be a little bit happier today, because aches and pains can ruin your day, and the opposite is true as well. If your body is in a liberated state, it'll bring you more. At least a positive outlook on your day, if not happiness. Yeah,
that's awesome, Benjamin. Well, thanks for sharing everything you shared so far. We're going to take a really brief break, and when we come back, we're going to really dig in on your journey, because you've alluded to some really fun things, and I can't wait for the audience to hear more about it. So we'll be back in a second.
Awesome.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
Okay, Benjamin, we are back. So this is the part of the show where you get to share your journey to today and, what you're up to today, meaning, yes, you can talk about what you're up to today, what is today? August 12th, if you want to. But yeah, like a little bit about your journey. You shared with us that you are from Germany originally, that you got into dance, you moved into Pilates and fitness, and that you now run a software company. So this is your time to shine. Let us know anything you'd like to about yourself.
All right. How much time do I have?
However much, it's my show, however much time you want. As long as it's interesting. If it gets boring, then I'll just cut you off and then we'll move on to the next thing. I promise. I'll give you the Oscar music if it's going too long. How about that?
Awesome. Great. I always want to treat the Oscar music to my own speech.
Exactly.
Bucket list item for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, my journey. So yeah, as you said, I grew up in Germany in a town called Gelsenkirchen, which nobody needs to remember or know how to spell. And I discovered dance in my youth, which, as I mentioned, was sort of a real departure point for me to understanding what I was going to do with my life. It became a trajectory and a direction for me that I pursued for as long as I could. I moved to the Netherlands right after high school to study dance, to be part of a 4-year dance academy program. I moved to New York shortly after that, where I also first got in touch with Pilates, and that's where sort of the next big moment in my life happened. I have a hypermobile shoulder and got injured very, very badly in dance training. To the
what
point
was
of,
sorry? What was you said you have a what shoulder?
A shoulder injury, a shoulder surgery as a result of that. Yeah, my shoulder just kept spontaneously dislocating. Oh, I think I said I had a hypermobile shoulder.
Oh, hypermobile. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So with hypermobility, typically also comes increased responsibility to control it, which I didn't have as a young dancer. And my shoulder would just do its own thing and dislocated frequently, which is not pleasant. And it basically resulted in me needing surgery right at the moment where I graduated the dance academy. So while all my classmates were auditioning and starting their exciting new chapter in the real world of dance work, I was in rehab, and I was introduced to Pilates in a very meaningful way. And that's when sort of my first light bulb went off that is a direction that I wanted to go into, and a way for me to learn about my body. And the proof was in the method, so to speak. Against the warning of my surgeon that I may not be able to perform anytime soon, I was back on stage within 3 months. And
yeah,
I really had to credit the Pilates method for that. So when I moved to New York shortly after on a scholarship to become a teacher of a specific dance technique, I also started my journey as a Pilates teacher and, doing trainings, starting the certification process, which is a very long one. And that was sort of, the entryway into something that kept me busy for the last decade, really. And fast forward, moved back to Germany, had a few more years as a dancer, performing, met my now husband on a brief visit to New York. And within, I believe it was less than a month, I just gave everything up and moved to New York. To pursue my then romantic goals, which, obviously worked out. Been together for 13 years now. And, started a life in New York where dance was a very different type of profession than it was back home in Germany or in Europe in general. And it was very hard to make ends meet. New York is a very, ruthless place in the performing arts. And I realized at that point that I didn't quite have the bite for it. I didn't quite have the drive for it. But what really interested me was this Pilates thing. And it was something that was to be found on every corner in New York. So I very quickly transitioned into a career as a Pilates teacher, pursued that for many years. And after teaching X thousands of Pilates lessons, I became a teacher trainer for a national teacher training program in the United States. And that's when one of the most momentous things happened for me, where I started digging really deeply into historical research on the Pilates method. And if you need to play that Oscar music anytime soon, do it. As I'm like nerding out about that part of Pilates, which is probably not interesting to most people. But long story short, Joseph Pilates, who's the guy who came up with this word, was also a German guy who ended up in New York and developed this method and started a studio, which has turned into this multi-million-dollar business and fitness method that is now known around the world. But it was this underground movement, and understanding that this guy was really raised and spent a lot of time in my hometown, and somehow in the early 1920s made it to New York and created this amazing body of work, got me super obsessed and fascinated. So I went down this rabbit hole of historical research and developed a perspective on the Pilates method, which again is a huge industry now, that was kind of perceived as a bit of a missing link for many teachers in the industry that had a desire to learn more about the origins of the work, to better understand how to position Pilates within sort of the health, fitness, and wellness landscape that now exists. And that perspective is, in a nutshell, something along the lines of that Pilates really deserves its own category. I think most people know it as sort of, your core training fitness method. It's a workout for many. It's therapy for others. It's rehab. It's therapeutic and clinical in some other realms. And it is really a place of movement meditation for, again, another group of people. And the fact that the Pilates method can cater to all of these different elements of health and wellness means that it is quite unique, and it is a category of its own. So my work, ever since sort of finding out about that, has really been about developing a delivery model to help teachers as well as practitioners in the Pilates industry and community understand those principles better and create a stronger foundation for the work that they're so passionate about. One thing I love about the industry is that it's full of insanely passionate people. So I very quickly found myself in that realm of then traveling around the world, teaching workshops, giving my speeches, talking about the techniques of Pilates, the history of Pilates, the anatomy of Pilates, and what have you, speaking at conferences, and really making a name for myself as an educator in that realm. Until, and this brings me into today, I was kind of hoping that there was a way for me to use this perspective differently, where it didn't depend on me stepping on a plane to show up somewhere and speak for 2 hours and then disappear again, but where the work in the way that I have researched and discovered it can just exist on its own and people can observe it, kind of like a museum exhibit, but in a digital, technological, future-facing way, which is really a missing piece in the Pilates world as well. So that then led me to the development of the project that is called 360 Pilates, which stands for circling all the way back to the origins of the work and coming full circle by sort of bringing it into today and making it relevant for the future, embracing the diversity and approach within the Pilates industry, as well as embracing its past, present, and future. So the circular imagery is just really omnipresent throughout the entire project, which is why it's called 360 Pilates. And yeah, for the last 2 years, as I've mentioned or hinted at earlier, it's become an online platform. And that is, especially during the past few months, given how the world is changing and how travel is prohibitive and how being in the same room with others is prohibitive, it really allowed me to focus 100% on this project and bring it to life in a way that I just wasn't able to before because I was on the road too much. So it's that's how it's gotten to today. We just launched the third iteration, 3.0 of the platform, which is basically, imagine a Pilates dedicated version of Udemy and LinkedIn and Netflix all rolled into one platform where people can self-study the work, research the work, take courses on the work, communicate with others, network with others, as well as really develop their own perspective on the work. That's, I think, my journey in the briefest way I can think of.
Yeah, that's great, Benjamin. Thanks for sharing that. So the 360 Pilates, who are the types of people who use the platform? Like what does your clientele look like on that platform?
Yeah, it's predominantly teachers because for the last, I believe, 7, if not 8 years, I've essentially been traveling around the world meeting Pilates teachers and really getting into the community as a leader as well as a companion to the industry. So I've made many connections and got to know the industry inside and out really, really well over the last few years. So the initial vision for this project was really dedicated to the Pilates profession. What's happening with the new iteration is that we're also opening the doors to making sort of the mysteries of Pilates that are typically reserved to the professionals that know everything about Pilates. They only teach bits and pieces to their clients and students. The latest iteration is really about opening the doors and let everybody who's interested in Pilates and who believes that it's a self-healing method and something that is to be owned and understood, not necessarily something you do Wednesdays at 9 because it fits in with your workout program. It's a way of life. It's a philosophy on movement. Anybody who understands, embraces, and finds that interesting will have access to this platform and will find what they need in it. So we're pretty much straddling now this demographic of anyone who's interested in the Pilates method on a serious level. It's not necessarily the best place to get to know Pilates. I will say that it is definitely a huge exposure tool for somebody who's been tinkering with it for a while and who's fascinated by it and who wants to know more and wants to own their practice better. That's really what it is designed for.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, congratulations on that's a pretty incredible journey. Congratulations on all that. Congratulations on the software launch. And I know that the business and the platform is quickly growing. You're building an awesome community there. And just so it's called 360 Pilates. So if you just Google that, is that the first thing that'll come up? I'm not in front of my computer to look at that, but is that where people can find it and check it out?
I should probably test that, shouldn't I? I should probably test the Google results. You will find it by typing in 360Pilates, one word.com, 360Pilates.com. That's a good way to find it. You'll find it on Instagram. 360 Pilates Online is our handle there. But I believe if you type in 360 Pilates, you'll find it quite easily.
Gotcha. Sounds great. All right. No Oscar music. That was fantastic. I'm actually going to give you the Oscar music box now because this is the part of the show where you get to ask me anything. You get to ask me something and you get to get off the hot seat and I get to get on the hot seat. And it's very likely that I'll go along. So you get the Oscar music queued up as well. So Benjamin, what would you like to ask me about and have me answer on the show today?
Yeah, so this is a question that I just love running by anybody I talk to these days because, I think we're living in, this time of uncertainty and there's always a little bit of doom and gloom around the corner. So the question I would like to ask you is what's been one of the most positive outcomes of the last few months for you personally? And I believe I know the answer, but that's what I want to ask you.
Will you tell me at the end of my answer whether this is what you were expecting?
100%.
All right, perfect. Great question. The most positive thing for me has been, there's two things that come to mind. I want to say more time with the family. And I also want to acknowledge that being in a house with a 4-year-old for the last almost 6 months, with no real school, like just virtual school and being together all the time. Let's put it this way. My wife and I, we're ready for her to go to school in the fall. I think she's ready to go to school in the fall. I think there's definitely an element of let's all get back to our cadence that we had before COVID, which is obviously not going to be perfect. But I think, like moving outside of how that's just been more of a challenge for us. And if any parent you talk to, this has been the great balance and the great, I think, challenge for any parents that are used to having like help at home. The kids are in school, kids are in preschool, the parents go off to work, and whether they work for themselves and work from home or they go to an office, and then to suddenly be like, hey, all those things you used to do and all those ways that you're used to living, nope, the three of you are in a house together all the time, all day, every day. So that has been great in that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I know you don't have children, but I know that also you're, like you talked about, you're used to flying around the world and doing speaking engagements. And suddenly it's like, you've been in Cyprus for how long now? I think like 3 or 4 months, something like that, if not longer.
I don't know. Time is an elusive thing, I believe. Well, how long ago is March? 5 months.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, the time, it's, yeah. So I think the best thing about that has been not feeling the rush to create what you call quote unquote quality time, where like, because you're together, like as a parent, for me, it's like, oh, you got to make the most of the moments because you're all so busy and they're at school and you're doing this. And now like, no, we're actually here all the time. So it's actually just a little bit more of the sitting back and enjoying the moments that don't actually require you to go travel or go to Disney World or, take a kid to Frozen on Broadway. It's like, oh, like we can just enjoy like having a picnic in the yard together. And that's actually enough. Like, it doesn't always have to be some like bold thing that's crazy. So that's been, it's a tie between that and then the other thing that I've talked about. I think this might been where you were thinking about is we actually moved out of Brooklyn for the year and we're up in the country, up in Sullivan County, New York. It's in the Catskills, and that's been pretty awesome to spend the spring and the summer at a place with thousands of trees and rocks and clean air and clean water and swimming and boating and just feeling like we have space and being able to just go outside and not have to wear a mask. Like we still wear masks when we go to the grocery store and such, but we don't have to wear a mask in our neighborhood. There's just not enough people around to make a difference.
Right.
So I think between the two, I don't know, it's kind of equal. Like, and I think in a way they're related, but it's definitely getting a change. And I'm also somebody who likes a lot of change. So just kind of flipping the script and changing up our life and moving somewhere different for the last 6 months, coupled with more quality time with our daughter and with my wife. I'd say both of those are equal for me in terms of the best things that have happened during COVID.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What were you thinking about?
Well, I was actually going to say that you would say those exact two things, to be honest.
There you go.
I and I hope that's true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely similar for me, minus the 4-year-old. But I think the idea of time and space, which not just physical space, but also space to think about the stuff that you didn't have time for before, reading the book you didn't have time for before, etc. Learning that language or what have you, or doing absolutely nothing and being bored to tears. I think having space for that is definitely something that's super profound and I think often overlooked because I think deep down we're all afraid of that standstill. But yeah, I knew you were going to answer something in the realm of being up there in upstate as well as spending more time with your family. So nailed it.
Nailed it. You got me. Too predictable. One thing you just mentioned that I want to hone in on for just a minute before we move on. There's something that you said that just struck me that I hadn't thought about. It's actually super cool to not feel like you have to make every moment count. You're like, oh, I'm busy with my job and my wife's busy with her job. And all these things that you got and you're like, the moments have to count versus feeling like there's more space to let them in a way breathe. And like not every second has to count. So what struck me is when you said reading books, I just finished my first fiction book that I've read in like 6 months or like probably a year. And I'm like, oh, that was really, really awesome. And so I picked up a second one and I'm reading like a fun fiction book that I've, like, is it going to change my life? No, but just feeling like, oh, I can actually just do that without feeling like I got to constantly hustle, constantly grind it, commuting on the subway back and forth, traveling on airplanes, all those things. And just having that space, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's all, at the end of the day, I think the secret is every moment counts, right? And I think every moment of levity, even if it doesn't seem meaningful in the bigger scheme of things, but it is, money in the bank, so to speak, for your well-being, to do whatever you want, or not do whatever you want. And I think it kind of goes back to what I said about movement earlier. It's a similar philosophy. It's more about being in tune with what feels good right now. And is that maybe good enough and meaningful in and of itself, even if it's not, something you're going to report back to your friends after.
Yeah,
but it's,
awesome.
a little victory for your own well-being.
Well, thank you very much for the thoughtful question. Sounds like that's a conversation starter you've used with other people.
Yeah, and my socializing has definitely suffered from living up in the mountains. The closest living beings to us are donkeys.
That's amazing.
So my socializing is very much virtual at this point, but it is something that I always like to talk about because it gets dark very easily, and I think there's space for some light to slip in every now and then as well, and realize, okay, there are good things that are happening despite all the heartbreaking hardship that is experienced around the world, economically, health-wise, and in everything that's happening. But I also think that there's a flip side to that that's worth talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome, Benjamin. All right, back to you. I'm taking the music back. I think I'm going to put it away in the box. We're not going to use it today. I'll reserve it. I'll reserve it for my next guest / victim on the show. What's the thing that you are most proud of?
Well, I think right now it's quite obviously the product that just launched, 360 Pilates 3.0, is something I'm incredibly proud of. But I think within that, the thing I'm most proud of is to sticking to a vision that I had 7 years ago and letting it go through many different iterations, from it being a blog at first, and then morphing into a single 3-hour workshop, and then turning it into a long form workshop, turning it into longer forms of writing, a podcast at some point. There were all these different iterations, a workshop program that I traveled for, an actual teacher training program, etc. Like, until it arrived where it is today, there was just a lot of revision after revision after revision. So, everyone's favorite word these days, pivot, is something that I've experienced for the last 7 years. But it was always with a very clear vision behind it all. And I think the stamina and just pushing it forward is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And I think it goes back to what I said about not being able to let things go. There always needs to be refinement. And this is a total aside, so please bleep me off if you need to. But it's something that I've come to call the Starlight effect, which is a little bit of a nerdy story, but many people may not know that. I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Jackson's Thriller.
I am very familiar.
Okay, so did you know that song was initially called Starlight?
No, I had no idea.
Had completely different lyrics, did not have a horror theme. It was more of your feel-good, roller skate disco type song. And that was going to be the name of the album. That was going to be the song. And it was refined and refined and refined until it turned into this masterpiece, which I believe really changed the world in a lot of different ways, right? Imagine for a second that song never came out in the way it did. And I think if you YouTube it and you put in Starlight Michael Jackson, you'll see it and you can listen to it. It's quite something. So I personally call it the Starlight effect, when I continue to just tinker and tinker and tinker to hopefully find my thriller, so to speak. Damn, that's a nerdy story there. But
no, that's great. I'm a huge nerd for that stuff. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
So I think that's been the through line for the last 7 years: constant revision and constant improvement, and just never fully being satisfied with good enough. At the same time, realizing perfection doesn't exist either. But like the moving something forward is what's important, not the arriving. The journey is the goal, kind of thing. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Very cool, Benjamin. That's awesome. So next question. What's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
Oh.
Sorry. Not sorry.
Great question. I believe I'll answer it like this. I'm afraid what might be true about me is that I am very single-minded and single-focused. And what I mean with that is when I am focused on something, which often is my work, there's very little space for anything else in terms of my interest levels. And I'm sure I've used this analogy in conversation with you before, but it's almost like my interest levels are a light switch that's either on or off, and there's very little in between. So I don't know if that's the same as saying I'm a workaholic, but I think I'm quite obsessive when it comes to working and tinkering on my whatever it is, really. If it's work, it's work. It can be relationships, it can be friendships, communication styles, it can be my travel, it can be all of those different things. But there's usually only one thing that I'm just completely consumed by at any one moment. With other words, multitasking is not my strong suit.
Well, so maybe multitasking is outside your comfort zone.
There you go. Very much so.
So
I think it's outside my ability levels.
A bit. There you go. Outside your ability. You are not a multi-threaded thought process. I have a question for you, actually, about when you met your husband. And you said you met him and within a month had picked up and moved. Is the same kind of single-threaded focus? Was that when you met him? Was that also the kind of the same experience of how your relationship went?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I up until that moment, I did not necessarily believe in the idea of love at first sight, but then kablam, it happens. And when that focus set in of, there's something here that I need to explore, I was very quickly willing to give a lot of things up to move my life across continents. And there were a lot of changes that I think from somebody who comes from, the German culture, which, you don't really do many things without having a plan B, C, and D ready. To just kind of throw yourself into a massive life change and giving up the things that you worked so hard on building up, which for me at that point was, having my own apartment, having a car, working with the dance company of my dreams, having a teaching gig on the side, teaching a little bit of Pilates. I thought I had everything in place that I really wanted in life. And then there's this one moment where all of a sudden, all of that is overturned. And it's, in hindsight, super romantic. Great stuff for the next gay rom-com. But, at the time, it was obviously also very, very stressful. But it was a dedication that I had, a commitment to seeing this thing through because I could not turn it off. That light switch was on. And it still is, thankfully.
It's awesome.
So, but yeah, I think that definitely falls into that sort of thing. So it's not always a bad thing, that dedication and single-minded focus.
Oh yeah. So the opposite of that is what you see from a lot of people, myself included, is like the ADD part of this is, hey, I'm going to do this. And then you get halfway done. You're like, oh, I'm bored. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. So the question I had for you about this topic specifically before we move on, has there ever been something in your life that you've been kind of like that single track mind you've been really focused on that hasn't worked out for you?
I think I can honestly say no, because I think I fundamentally do not believe in regret. And that's maybe different from saying everything happens for a reason, yada da. But I don't look back in anguish over what might have been. So I feel like everything that may have come out that didn't work out the way I thought, I think was all part of the journey. and I think I can say that about what happened to me when I picked up my dance diploma with my arm in a cast because of my shoulder injury, and I couldn't go audition. And I could easily say, okay, I was so focused on this one thing, put all my eggs in one basket, and now that's, threatened by what's happening to my body. And I was in my early 20s and ready to take on the world and was put on hold. But in hindsight, it was one of the most important things that happened to me because it readjusted my trajectory in so many ways. So I feel like things haven't always worked out, but I think, like I said in the beginning, embracing failure and disappointments as parts of, what shapes you, being my superpower and all. I can't look at that from a place of regret.
Mm-hmm.
So along the same lines, I can't then say it hasn't worked out in the end, because it always has. Not in the way that I expected it to, but it has moved me to a place where I can then move in a different direction and embrace that and become single focused on something else.
Yeah, very cool. But it's actually one of the questions I generally ask on the show as we start to wrap up is that give us, if you could give us your general philosophy on life. But I'm actually not going to ask you this because coupled with what you just said, plus everything you'd shared today, I think you've already completely answered that for us. And
great.
And if you want to answer anything else, you can. But I'm like, yeah, Benjamin's philosophy is crystal clear. So thank you for sharing all that today. So as we start to get near the end of the episode, wanted to ask you if there's anything else that you wanted to share with the audience. And that can be something that maybe came up from a previous question that popped in your mind since then. If there's anything you want them else to know about you, about 360 Pilates, the donkeys in Cyprus, it's all fair game. So is there anything else you'd like to share at this point?
I think usually I would have probably gone into, the lessons learned while traveling the world, which obviously is impossible right now. So there's really no wisdom to impart on those lessons learned during my, living as a nomad. But I don't know. I think what I want to share in addition to what I've already talked about is just really this idea of looking for the opportunities we have right now to journey to a different place of awareness of our lives. I think, this goes back to what we talked about just a little bit ago. I think the opportunity is there to reframe and clean up, in perfect Marie Kondo fashion, look at aspects of your life and ask yourself, do they spark joy? And if not, fold them up 3 times and toss them out the window. But, I think there is space for revision right now, and it's needed, and it's a really great time to explore that, especially if you find yourself not getting much joy or empowerment out of looking at the reality of life right now. I think going into that mental journey of, moving outside of what you're familiar with, I think is really a powerful lesson that I sort of picked up simply from traveling around the last 2.5 years. And obviously now I'm glad I did, because I don't know if I can anymore going forward.
Yeah.
Try and travel in any of the ways that you can. Yeah. Not by jumping on a plane, but in your mind.
Travel in your mind. Very cool, Benjamin. Where can the audience find you? Where can they connect with you, connect with 360 Pilates? Yep. Just where are you located at, besides on the mountain in Cyprus?
Yeah, exactly. So if you find the donkey farm in the Cypriot Mountains, I'm right next door. Come and say hi. If you're not there, the best way to connect with me would probably be via either my personal website, which is my name, benjamindegenhardt.com. I am not going to spell that. Maybe
I'll put it in the show notes.
Show notes, exactly. The place where I spend most of my time is 360pilates.com, which is the platform. So if you're a Pilates nerd, please check it out. And if you're just curious what it looks like, I'll appreciate any visitor, of course. I'm on Instagram under my name, Benjamin Degenhardt, 360 Pilates online. So those are the places that you can find me best these days.
And maybe someday again in the future on a stage, but we'll see. We'll even see about that, right? We'll see when all comes back. We'll see. Awesome, Benjamin. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It has been awesome to get learn some new fun stuff about you and have a really cool conversation. So a tradition on the show, we always like to wrap up with having a guest leave our words of wisdom. So what are some words of wisdom you'd like to leave for our audience today? And the words of wisdom should fit on a Post-it note or on an Instagram post. What do you got for us?
Well, that's great because I'm staring at a wall full of Post-it notes.
That's perfect. Old school.
I do have some really big Post-it notes though. So anywho, I didn't mean to brag.
Big Post-it notes, small Post-it notes. It's good. Yeah. What do you got for us?
I'll probably sound a bit like a broken record, but I think the words of wisdom I tell myself every single day, there are in fact on a Post-it note right in front of me, is observe and study. And what I mean with that is, especially if we find ourselves in a reactionary mode right now, where we react to the things that happen and the uncertainty and the ever-changing reality of what we're living through right now, I think a really good place to go is into observation mode. Sit back, observe, study what's happening, see what it means for you. And I think, like we said earlier, like allow every moment to be meaningful for however you choose to fill it, from that place of observation and not reacting in a panic. We need our positivity for better thoughts.
Yeah. Awesome, Benjamin. Thank you so much for being on today. It's been, like I said before, it's been a pleasure. Congratulations to you and the 360s Pilates team on the launch a few weeks ago. Beautiful website. Everybody check it out. And I'm sure we'll be talking again very soon, Benjamin. Have a wonderful time in the mountains of Cyprus.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
You're welcome. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're Thanks cool for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.